The ProArt PX13 and the Zephyrus G14 are both small but powerful laptops. But from the inside, these two are very different. And one is catered towards a creative audience, while the other is more of a gaming laptop. So what are the differences? And more importantly, which one is better? Let's find out. And please like and subscribe if you like these type of videos. These are both very sturdy laptops. The ProArt has a fully magnesium body, while the Zephyrus is fully aluminum. So both are all metal, which feels awesome. There's basically no flexing to be found anywhere. The ProArt is noticeably more lightweight though, mainly because it's smaller. The Zephyrus isn't heavy or anything, but the difference is there. From the outside, obviously the Zephyrus is slightly bigger than the Flow since it's 13 inches versus 14 inches, but the difference is actually tiny. The Zephyrus is also a little thicker than the ProArt, but that's mainly because it has a lot more cooling in it. And that's because these laptops use two very different architectures. The Zephyrus has a powerful dedicated RTX 5070 Ti GPU, while the ProArt has the most powerful integrated GPU out of any laptop. And that singular combined chip on the ProArt means it uses a lot less power. And also means it can share all of its memory between both the CPU and GPU. And this means you could have a laptop with up to 96 gigabytes of VRAM and 32 gigabytes of regular RAM, which is just crazy compared to the 12 gigabytes on the Zephyrus. That gives huge advantages to creative works that use a lot of VRAM, like local AI models. But more RAM doesn't necessarily make it faster. They both have a very similar port selection, but the Zephyrus slightly wins by having a USB-A port on both sides of the laptop. Now, even though they both have 200 watt power bricks, the Zephyrus one is actually a tiny bit bigger. Which is weird because the ProArt can actually go up to 240 watts at a higher amperage. Very interesting. They both support USB-C charging up to 100 watts though, so smaller charging bricks are a possibility. Now let's move on to their keyboards. They both do have backlights, which is handy, but the ProArt's backlight only has a light blue color, while the Zephyrus just has a single zone RGB backlight. They both get about as bright, but a black background just looks a little better with lighting. The Zephyrus also has 4 extra macro keys at the top here, which are handy, and extra space on the sides of the keyboard for top speaker grills, which we'll hear later. Now here's how their actual keys compare. They feel and sound very similar, but I do slightly prefer the ProArt. It has a tiny bit more key travel and is slightly more clicky, but the Zephyrus definitely isn't bad at all. Now on a side note, the Zephyrus's power button is here above the keyboard, but the ProArt actually has it on the side of the laptop, which is interesting. Moving down, we have their trackpads. And they both make full use of their size. I'm actually pretty sure these are almost identical units. They're both made of metal, so they feel very premium. But I do slightly prefer the clicks of the ProArt. It requires ever so slightly less force to press down, and the clicks are just a bit more satisfying. But of course the ProArt has a nipple in the corner. This is called the ProArt dial, and it's basically a bunch of macro keys that you can operate, well, like a dial. You can set a bunch of app-tied functions to this thing, like scrubbing across your timeline on Premiere Pro, or other very specific functions. It's a pretty handy tool to optimize your workflow. But if you don't want to use it, you can always just keep it off and use it like a normal trackpad. Moving up, we have their screens, and the Zephyrus has by far the superior panel, with a 120Hz 3K OLED display. They are both OLEDs, so they both have gorgeous, vibrant colors, infinite contrast, and by God, perfect inky blacks, especially in the dark. But 120 Hz just looks so much better than 60. It's not even close. Even if you don't plan on playing games on your laptop, a higher refresh rate display is smoother at everything. be it scrolling web pages or even just moving your mouse around. It's just really disappointing that such an expensive laptop is stuck with a 60Hz display. They do both get about as bright, so definitely enough for outside use, but you're gonna have a way better time with the Zephyrus outside, since it actually has an anti-reflective layer, while the ProArt does not. And the difference really is massive. So if you want to use your laptop outside, or even inside near a window or a light, the Zephyrus will be way less distracting. However, the ProArt has a 360-degree hinge, so it's definitely a lot more versatile. And it can also be used as a kind of tablet, because it actually has a touch display, while the Zephyrus does not. And it also has stylus support, while again, the Zephyrus does not. However, 360-degree hinges are a lot more floppy, so it might not be as fun to use while walking around. The Zephyrus is also pretty wobbly, but definitely a lot less. Now, when it comes to speakers, Windows laptops don't really have the best track record. But the Zephyrus G14 has basically the best speakers out of any Windows laptop. So how does the ProArt PX13 compare? Well, it does sound really good, but nowhere near the Zephyrus. It's a bit limited by the fact that it only has downfiring speakers on the bottom, while the Zephyrus has some big grills on the top as well as dedicated subwoofers on the bottom. So compared to the Zephyrus, the ProArt definitely has a lot less bass and volume overall. I mean, the Zephyrus really is something else. But it has the same great surround sound and clarity, so it does still sound really good. Both of the webcams aren't especially amazing, but the Zephyrus does look a little sharper. They both have great sounding microphones though. But again, I think the Zephyrus sounds slightly better. But let's get to the real important stuff, performance. The ProArt has a really fast APU, with the fastest integrated GPU out of any laptop. But the Zephyrus G14 has an RTX 5070 Ti, which is a beast of a graphics card. So which one of these is faster? Well, for their processors, in Cinebench R23, the ProArt's Ryzen 395 crushes the Zephyrus's HX 370 in multi-core performance. 16 full performance cores give you quite some power. But in 3D Mark TimeSpy, the pure graphical power of that 5070 Ti is almost 50% faster than that 8060S in the ProArt. So the Zephyrus is just faster GPU-wise, right? Well, benchmarks aren't everything, and the ProArt has a huge advantage. It's shared memory. Like I said, the 5070 Ti on the Zephyrus has 12 GB of VRAM, which is plenty for games, but not for bigger creative tasks like 3D modeling or even running local AI models. But the ProArt has 128 GB of shared memory, which gives you up to 96 GB for the GPU alone. So on the ProArt, you can actually run the biggest local AI models, be it image or text generation. And 12 GB of VRAM is just very lacking for that. So the ProArt definitely has a lot of power, but how does that compare to an actual gaming laptop in some actual games?
What did you do, man? No!
So the Zephyrus is definitely better at playing games. At their full resolution of 1800p, the ProArt sometimes went well below 60 FPS, while the Zephyrus handled everything with ease. The ProArt's iGPU is about on par with a laptop RTX 4060, which is definitely not a slow card. But compared to a 5070 Ti, let's just say it's better to play at 1200p, since that gives you almost the same performance as the Zephyrus on 1800p. 1200p does not look bad on these smaller displays though. I mean, you barely notice the difference between it and their full resolutions. So can the ProArt play games? Absolutely. But the Zephyrus just does it better. But performance isn't everything. The ProArt is a lot more power efficient since it has both the CPU and GPU on a single chip. So what does that mean for temperatures and fan noise? Well, it makes a huge difference. During a high workload stress test, the ProArt CPU stayed almost 10 degrees cooler than the Zephyrus, which is a massive difference. Its iGPU also stays a lot cooler since, it's on the same place as the processor, so it doesn't get much hotter. But the ProArt is actually a little bit limited because it doesn't have that much room for air intake on the bottom. So if we prop it up a little, it stays even cooler. I mean, not even 70 degrees for a high power laptop is unheard of. It's just a lot more power efficient than a separate CPU and GPU. And less power means less heat. But does that also mean less noise? Well, they're both really not that loud compared to the average gaming laptop, but the ProArt is definitely a little quieter. Both of these laptops stayed completely quiet while doing light tasks or just sitting there though. But since the ProArt has a more efficient design, does that also mean it has longer battery life? Well, I tested their batteries in two different scenarios, under light use and during gaming. In the light use test, I played a YouTube video until both of their batteries died with their displays at 80% brightness, at 60 Hz and while using their iGPUs. And they both have really long battery life, well over 10 hours. But the Zephyrus did last slightly longer. The ProArt's Ryzen 395 might use the same chip architecture, but it lacks any kind of efficiency cores, which use less power on battery, unlike the Zephyrus's HX370, which does have them. But this test was a little bit unfair, because I disabled the Zephyrus's dedicated GPU, while the ProArt doesn't even have a dedicated GPU. So what about battery life when you're actually actively using their GPUs? Well, in the gaming test, I played Battlefield 1 until their batteries died, with the same settings as before. And the ProArt lasted more than double as long as the Zephyrus in gaming. They do both get a lot slower on battery, but you could actually use the ProArt as a portable gaming machine, while that won't last very long on the Zephyrus. And this will also be the case with creative work. The ProArt will last a lot longer if you're actually doing something with its GPU than the Zephyrus. So if you want to do 3D modeling or edit videos on the go, you're probably gonna have to go with this guy. But the ProArt is a smaller, thinner laptop. So does that mean it has less space for upgradeability? Unfortunately, yes. They both have soldered memory, which is a bummer, but I don't think you'll need to do that very quickly with the ProArt's 128 GB. But while the Zephyrus has two full-size M.2 SSD slots, the ProArt only has a single slot and only fits the smaller 2230 SSDs, which are more expensive and less available. At least they both still have an upgradable Wi-Fi card though. But here's where it gets painful: pricing. The Zephyrus is already on the expensive side since it's a thin and light gaming laptop. You can, however, get lower spec GPU models, which are a lot more affordable. But the ProArt only just released, and this model with 128 GB of memory is $3,000. Now there are cheaper models with less memory or even a slightly slower CPU, but those prices are all over the place right now. In general though, you're gonna find the Zephyrus for a lot less money. On a side note, these prices may seem high, but in like a month or two, you're gonna wish you bought them at these prices. Manufacturers' stockpiles of memory are running out with the AI craze, and this will affect laptop prices massively. So if you're in need of a laptop, buy one within the month, because in a couple months, everything's gonna be pretty much double the price. Okay, let's get to a conclusion. Which one of these is the better laptop? The Zephyrus G14 or the ProArt PX13? Well, with 99% of people, I'm gonna have to go with the Zephyrus. The ProArt PX13 is a remarkable machine. And with this much shared memory, it can do things that laptops triple its size can't even dream of. You can run huge graphical projects and even massive AI models locally on a tiny, thin 13-inch laptop, which is just crazy. But most people aren't gonna do that. And for those people, the Zephyrus just does everything right. With a 5070 Ti, it's considerably faster for playing games. Its display is smoother and it has a way better anti-reflective layer. And while a 360-degree hinge is very cool for some, most people just want a classic laptop design with a regular hinge. So if you're gonna do stuff that require a massive amount of VRAM, the ProArt is a dream machine. But if you don't, just get the Zephyrus, because it does everything else basically perfect and it's also cheaper. And that's pretty much it. And let me give a huge shout out to my YouTube members. Soundwife, Thomas, Inky, Mr. Frosty Dude, Dropzone1, Martijn Snijkers, Flimsy, Aki, Mr. Nuke, Sebastian, Christian Sands, Real Elf, Eric the Red, Wesley Rhodes, Michael, Ghost Data, Ano Gadar, Abdullah, Lewis, and Ethan. If you become a YouTube member, you get early access to content of mine, a shout out at the end of every video, and you'll also be supporting me as a creator to make these videos. And of course, you'll also be part of the Cool Guys Club, so you can use cool emojis like these in the comment section. So join the club if you're interested. And I will see you all in the next video. Bye bye.